There we go. The great problem with being a part-time local pastor is you never get to practice what you're going to preach. You never get to run it all the way out. You just come up here and you do it. And in this particular case this morning, I'll be as surprised as you are as the slides I put on there. We'll figure out as we go. But I think I'll just start with that thought. I think we place a lot of faith in things that don't matter. We think that the world is an accident. We think that why do some people do better than others, and is it pure luck, and you get into all that whole thing, you know, why did that guy over there land that job and I didn't, and whatever it might be. How did they come into such good fortune, and it didn't look like they had anything to do with it, and so forth. And I want to talk a little bit about this idea of luck, but I also want to talk about what I believe. And it may or may not align with what you believe, but that's okay. We all can disagree on some things. But I do believe in providence. Go ahead, next slide, sweetie. Maybe. Okay, I'll start off with chance, then we'll talk about. So chance is a possibility of something happening, right? I mean, that's just pretty simple. That's and it's a possibility. May or may not happen. May not even happen at all. Next slide. In providence is the protective care of God. And right in that word providence is the word provider. And God provides us with everything that we need. And I want to talk about today this subject of God winks. And in our bulletin I did list out what that was. And I never heard it actually put that way before, but AJ kind of brought that up. And the whole purpose of today is really not a sermon in the sense of normal, I guess you'd say. It's more of a story. And in that story, your job as listeners today is to pick out all the times that there were God winks, coincidences that changed the situation or changed the outcome because God was in it. In the story I'm going to tell you, there are no miracles. In the book of Esther, God is never even mentioned. That only happens in 2 books of the Bible. The other one is the Song of Solomon, which is love poetry, so God's not mentioned there. But God is not even mentioned in this book, and that's why this is so awesome, because there's no miracles, there's no mention of God, and yet coincidences, constant, overriding, unbelievable, miraculous coincidences make the story go the way it should. And so the whole story of Esther is a miracle. And we're going to get into that. Hopefully I can stay on task. I wore a t-shirt under here today that it shows another one of them coincidences, I guess you'd say. Get through all these clothes I got on. Good grief. I can actually breathe now. It was a coincidence that he was born in the baby in the right town, right? Y'all know that? You know he's a king, right? You know, that was a coincidence, all of it. But was it? It was providence too, wasn't it? It was providence that allowed that to happen. Next slide, sweetie. J.C. Ryle's a bishop from back in the day of the Anglican Church, and I love what he said. Just as the telescope and the microscope show us that there is order and design in all the works of God's hands, from the greatest plant down to the least insect, so does the Bible teach us that there is wisdom, order, and design in all the events of our daily lives. If you think anything happened here today by accident, I don't believe like that. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in accident. I don't believe in anything like that. So there's no such thing as chance, luck, or accident in the Christian journey through this world. All is arranged and appointed by God, and all things are working together for the believer's good, Romans 8:28. Now, some people would struggle with that because that sounds like predestination. It sounds like it's all planned out and you can't choose differently. That's not what that says. In our scripture today, the one I put in the bulletin, we'll straighten that out real quick. And Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this." We're going to get into her story in just a minute. But basically, God's will was going to happen, whether she said yes to what he just said or not. And what his question to her was, Who knows whether you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this? That is my question for the church for 2019, the people in this building. Did God put you in this place at a time when the world's not doing so good so that you could respond in kind and be a part of His will? He will accomplish His will without you or with you. It doesn't matter. It will happen. His plans will come to pass, just like what happened on this shirt. Those things will happen. Does He use you, or does He use somebody else? Ken talked about embarrassment this morning at the end of our lives when we show up in heaven, and the tears might be because of our things we didn't do, things that we are ashamed of. I totally believe in providence. I totally believe that God is in control and He has His hand on each and every one of our lives. And yes, when we go left and we're supposed to go right, sometimes we get a thump on the head and we get turned that way. I get that. I understand that. People don't like discipline, but I think God does discipline us. I'm going to throw you my own personal providence that's happening right now in my own personal life. It's just one of those things. I just think it's better if you share your own things than to read something. And I hope I don't go way too long today. Y'all all fire me, but that's okay. I've been working at my job where I'm at for 5 years as of November 1. So come next year, for the first time ever, I get 3 weeks vacation. I'm allowed to roll over 1 week vacation. That puts me to 4 weeks vacation. We have somebody that we all sort of know through the church who does these tours going to the Holy Land. And I have the opportunity for a paid trip that I have to spend no money to go to the Holy Land. And I have, for the first time ever in my life, 4 weeks of vacation in my possession. That's a big deal. God's providence allowed me to go do that and still maintain my job and do the things I need to do. That's my belief. Now, you can take it as a coincidence, a God wink. I love the God wink term, but you can take it however you want. But I do believe, do you realize how far back in time you have to go to the plans of my life to get to the point on this particular time at this structure in my life that I would have those 4 weeks available to me? That's just, I know it doesn't sound like much to somebody, maybe it doesn't. It's not coincidence, people. God allows us to do things. He allows us to accomplish things. And I'll mention the trip, and here's the other part. This means you will not have a preacher on Palm Sunday because the preacher will be in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Now, how cool is that? I'll throw you another one in there. My birthday is April 19th, the day I return, which is Good Friday. So it's just one of those things, people. It's a lifetime of coincidences, right? No, it's not. So I get to be in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, folks. That's a huge deal to me. And of course, there's still room for people to go if they want to, and that's not my job to sell. I just tell you that if you want to try to go, and you got the money to go, do it. It's your choice. But that's my little speech about providence, and that's such a small thing. I could go into how I got here to take care of my mom and how that's kind of coming together, and she needs me. And I could go into 100 stories of my own personal life where God is intervening in my life and making things possible that I could never, ever have made come to pass. That is the background for our story today. This story is about a woman, an orphan Jew woman who really should have amounted to nothing. And yet she became the queen of the largest empire on planet Earth that ever existed as an orphan child. Think about that a minute if you think things are coincidence. Let us pray. And Heavenly Father, we thank you for, there's a word, fancy word, it's one of them $12 words I can't even use, called serendipity. We thank you for your providence, Lord. There's no chance. That's kind of silly, Lord, to even think about the word chance, but you provide for us. You promised to provide for us. You told us not to worry about tomorrow. And if we take away anything from today, we need to look at the fact that you order our steps, that you are in it to help us accomplish your will. The question is, are we in it as well? Help us to find the way, Lord, this year. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Next slide. So I'm going to do a little history. This is actually somebody I know something about. there's a king, which is the king in Esther. His name in here is I'll say his other name, which I do know how to say. He's King Ahasuerus. That's the best way I can pronounce it. But that's the translation of this guy's name. His name is Xerxes the First. And Xerxes the First was the son of another king, and I can mess his name up too. But anyway, do you guys know the story 300, the Spartans and all that kind of stuff? If you've seen that movie, the guy with the bald head and all the chains and all that mess, and who's the villain in that story, who's attacking the Spartans, is Xerxes, is this guy. The thing about the book of Esther, unlike all the other books that you might find, it's like 100% there. There's nothing missing. It's a complete story. And I think it's because it's a history it's because it's more history than it is necessarily a story about God. And the thing about stories about God, especially the Hebrew God, our God, is they get kind of pushed under the table. You know, they don't want nobody wants to carry that forward because it shows that they rule. But in this particular case, the queen is somebody who is of Jewish descent. And the thing about the Persians, and this guy was a pharaoh, and he goes back to Cyprus the Great, and he finally, his dynasty ends with Alexander the Great. These are all people that you can look up in history. These are all things you can learn. Really awesome stories, a lot of battles, the Battle of Thermopylae, all these different battles. Next slide, I forgot. Go next slide. And boy, you cannot see that. Who can read that? I need a side test. Who can read that? Anyway, but basically that's all the different kings through time, and they're all Persian kings, and Persia was huge. Next slide. Persia at that moment in time was the largest empire that ever existed. I mean, ever on planet Earth. This is the largest empire that ever existed. That's why I kind of got to give you all this so that you can see that the magnitude of this story, and yet it looks like it all just is coincidence. But these things don't happen by coincidence. But if you see that map, and it's hard to read, but the thing that our king had trouble with was he wanted to keep growing, and he wanted to take out Greece. And those people know how to fight. This guy had 1 million people in his army. 50 million people as subjects across all this land, but he had a 1 million-man army, and he had 10,000 elite soldiers, kind of like our Navy SEALs of the day. And he went and he tried, his dad tried, he failed, and this guy planned his whole life to go back and do the same thing. He also failed. And then eventually Alexander the Great, who was a Greek, came through, and the whole world changed. The world we know, the Roman world, the Bible, all the stuff we kind of know and understand moving forward happened after this kingdom failed. The kingdom prior to this was Babylon. So this kind of gives you the Babylonians ruled the world prior to the Persians. So that kind of gives you some history, but it is so amazing that this huge piece of history, and I'm going to read the first verses here in just a second. As a matter of fact, I'll read it right now while the map is up. The following events happened in the days of, I'm going to say Xerxes, because I can't pronounce this guy. And I'm referring to that king who used to rule over 127 provinces, extending all the way from India to Ethiopia. It's a huge part of the world, huge part of the world. In those days, Xerxes sat on a royal throne in Susa, the citadel. In the 3rd year of his reign, he provided a banquet for all his officials and his servants, and the army of the Persia and Media was present, as well as the nobles and officials of the provinces. So you can imagine this is a worldwide meeting. I mean, literally, it's a worldwide meeting at that point. He displayed riches of his royal glory and the splendor of majestic greatness for a lengthy period of time, 180 days to be exact. What he was doing in that 180 days was planning his battle against Greece. This is what, he's going back. We're going back, we're going to win this time, which he didn't. Those Greeks must be bad to the bone, is all I can say, because it's just got 1 million people marching army and they can't beat them. Problem is they're surrounded by water and it's very difficult. You get it. They're entrenched and it's hard to get to them. But when the days were completed, the king then provided a 7-day banquet for all the people who were present in Susa, the citadel, for those of high standing to the most lowly. It was held in a court located in the garden of the royal palace. The furnishings included linen, purple curtains hung by cords of finest linen, purple and wool, on silver rings, alabaster columns, gold and silver couches, people, displayed on the floor made of valuable stones of alabaster, mother of pearl, and mineral stone. Drinks were served in golden containers, all of which differ from one another. Royal wine was available in abundance at the king's expense. There were no restrictions on the drinking, for the king had instructed all of his supervisors that they should do as everyone has so desired. And Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in King Xerxes' royal palace. On the seventh day, the king was feeling the effects of the wine. After 7 days of drinking, he's finally feeling the effects of the wine. I'm just curious about that. He ordered his eunuchs who were attending him, the 7 of them, to bring Queen Vashti into the king's presence wearing her royal high turban. He wanted to show the people and the officials her beauty, for she was very attractive. But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's bidding conveyed through the councils, and the king became extremely angry, and his rage consumed him. Okay, so we're going back a few years, and things are a little different, obviously. But the theory is that maybe she was pregnant with the next king, and is why she didn't want to be seen in front of a crowd of drunken jerks. I mean, that could have been the fact she didn't want to be seen. It was probably felt like it was beneath her to be in front of a crowd of a bunch of men who've been drinking for 7 days. Who knows what the reason was, but she refused to go. Here we go I want y'all to be listening for coincidences. Okay, so she refuses to go. Sounds like just a plain, no big deal. But because she didn't go, the king gets very angry. And by the way, I have to tell this story on that king. He was malicious. He was evil. He was mean. He was one of those people who didn't put up with anything. When they tried to go back and attack Greece again, they built a bunch of bridges to get across the water in one spot to get to the land. And a storm came through and wiped out all the bridges. He beheaded all 300 of the people that worked on it. This king did. And this is where it gets crazy. He had the soldiers go and give 300 lashes to the water because the water had been insubordinate. I mean, it just cracks me up. And then he took some shackles and threw them in the water as if he was going to bind the water. Okay, this guy's a nut job anyway. But he thought you couldn't be insubordinate to him. So here's his queen. I'm just giving you background. He's being this insubordinate. And so the king talks to the wise men about the fact that the queen is being insubordinate. And these guys are his lawyers, or his attorneys, I guess you'd say. And they ask him, the king asks, it's by law, what should be done to the Queen Vashti in light of the fact that she has not obeyed the instructions of the king, conveyed through the eunuchs? And he said, the wrong of Queen Vashti is not against the king alone, but against all the officials and all the people who throughout the providence of the king. For the matter concerning the queen will spread to all the women. Here we go. They see this queen who they all look up to, saying, I'm not going to do that, which will lead them to treat their husbands with contempt, saying, when King Ahasuerus gave orders to the queen in his presence, she would not come. So we had a women's lib thing about to happen. The women we're going to watch this woman who stood up, and there's going to be ruckus in all the kingdom because this woman stood up. And anyway, so we had to squash this. And so basically he demotes her, and he doesn't kill her, which is amazing. I think, like I say, she might have been pregnant with the next king. But anyway, if the king is so inclined, let a royal edict go forth from him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia that Vashti may not come in the presence of the king. So basically, he kind of disbarred her, banned her, whatever. Anyway, so this is not a coincidence. I mean, it is a coincidence in the story, but it leads to what's about to happen that's most important. Chapter 2. When these things had been accomplished, the rage of the king had diminished. He remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decided against her. And the king's servants said to him, let a search be conducted in the king's behalf for attractive young women. And let the king appoint officers throughout the province of this kingdom, gather all the attractive young women to Susa, the citadel, and to the harem and the authority of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who oversees the women, and let him provide whatever cosmetics they desire. I love this part. Let the young woman who the king finds most attractive become queen in place of Vashti. This seemed like a good idea to the king, so he acted accordingly. Okay. So I want you to figure this out. There's 50 million people. This is the Miss Universe contest. They end up picking 400. Now this is coincidence, folks. out of 50 million, so 25 million of them are probably women, narrow it down to 400 beautiful women. They narrow it down in the story to the one Jewish orphan girl. Is that coincidence? I mean, think about a lottery, think about anything of those kind of odds. I'm just telling you that this is God, and we'll tell you more in a minute about why. So now there happened to be a Jewish man in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, who is the cousin of Esther. He was the son of Jair, the son of Shema, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken to exile from Jerusalem with the captives who had been carried into exile with Joachim, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken into exile. So these Jews had been in exile with the Babylonians. They've rebuilt the second temple, and now we're somewhat better off than we were. Anyway, and this guy had a position of power, and now he was acting as a guardian of Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for neither her father nor her mother were alive. This young woman was very attractive and had a beautiful figure, guys. She had a beautiful figure. They put it in the Bible, she had a beautiful figure. Anyway, when her father, it must have been, she was, like I say, picked out of 25 million people. Anyway, it came to pass that basically this particular person pleased him out of all these people. That was the one he chose. So now, Esther had not disclosed to anyone who her lineage was. Nobody knew she was Jewish, for Mordecai had instructed her to do so. And Mordecai will kind of coached her through this. The uncle kind of helped her know when and what to say and how. At the end of 12 months that was required for women, when the turn of each young woman arrived for the king Ahasuerus, for in this way they had to fill their time of cosmetic treatment. By the way, ladies, you like this part? They had 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfume and various ointments used by women. The woman would go to the king in the following way. Whatever she asked for will be provided for her to take for her from the harem to the royal palace. In the event she went, in the morning she returned to a separate part of the harem to the authority of the king and was overseeing the concubines. So basically they got anything they wanted. They had the best diet. They had everything. They were pampered and prepped and whatever. And crazy thing is just the amount of time, 2 years worth of time to get someone ready to meet the king. Think about that. That's a strange first date. Anyway, the part that is mind-boggling is that the fact that this person was an orphan Jewish person. And Mordecai, her uncle, he learns of a plot against the king. And he tells Esther, who tells him, and they kept a book, a chronicle of everything. These people were very learned, and that's the reason we have all this history. That's the reason we don't have any holes. These kingdoms had great amount of chronicles. Matter of fact, this book, Esther, is called the Scroll by the Hebrews. Literally called the Scroll because you can just take it and find it and read it, and it's written straight like it is, and it's not a lot of work to get to where we are today. But anyway, Mordecai, through Esther, stopped the king from being killed. And so it was written in the scrolls and the chronicles about this, and he had never been rewarded for this. And so Haman decides, for whatever reason, he doesn't like Mordecai, and he plots. And here's how it all starts. Sometime later, this chapter 3, verse 1, the king promoted Haman, the son of Hammedah, the Agagite, exalting him and setting his position above all the officials who were with him. As wrote the king's servants who were with the king's gate were bowing and paying homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded. However, Mordecai did not bow, nor did he pay homage. And the servants of the king who were at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you violating the king's commandment?" And after they had spoken day after day, without his paying any attention to them, they informed Haman to see whether this attitude on Mordecai's part would be permitted. Furthermore, he had disclosed to them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai was not bowing and paying homage to him, he was filled with rage, but the thought of striking out against Mordecai alone was repugnant to him, for he had been informed of the identity of Mordecai's people. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews. So this is a Holocaust event. Esther stops through her actions, a Holocaust. In the first month, in the 12th year of King Uzziah, there was a lot cast by Haman. And that's, if you notice in the bulletin, I talked about that. Basically, Haman drew lots on the day in which they would execute all the Jews across that green piece of property you see there. All the Jews on planet Earth, for that matter. Across 127 provinces, Haman had figured out a way to manipulate himself into power and to turn around and wipe these people out. But God was always going to keep his promise that his people would always be. And so this was not going to happen. And so that's why I say this story is God keeping his promises, even though you don't see God actually do anything in the story other than make the circumstances happen. So here's Haman's speech to the king. There is a particular people that is dispersed and spread among the inhabitants throughout all the provinces of your kingdom, whose laws differ from those of other peoples. Furthermore, they do not observe the king's laws. It is not appropriate for the king to provide a haven for them. If the king is so inclined, let an edict be issued to destroy them. And this guy's a rich man. I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to be conveyed to the king's treasuries for the officials who carry out this business. So not only does he give them the idea, he offers to pay 10,000 talents in order that this edict might happen, that the Jews would all be killed. So the king removed his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, who was hostile toward the Jews. The king replied to Haman, keep your money and do with those whatever you wish. So the royal scribes were summoned the first of the month, the 13th day of the month, and commanded was written to kings, satraps, and governors who were in every province, the officials of every people. Basically, the entire country was about to receive this edict from this guy. Verse 13, letters were sent by the runners to all the king's provinces, stating that they should destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews from the earth, from the young to the elderly, both women and children, on a particular day, namely the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar, and to loot and plunder their possessions. And a copy of the edict was presented as law throughout every province. Okay, so the king, he's a busy guy. He didn't get exactly what the thing was about, I don't think. I think he just saw the 10,000 talents and said, let's just do this. These people aren't obeying our laws, we need to kill them. So, everybody gets upset, obviously, because there's a death warrant out. And in chapter 4, now when Mordecai became aware of what had been done, this is her uncle, he tore his garments and put on sackcloth and ashes, and he went out into the city crying in a loud and bitter voice that he went no further than the king's gate, for no one was permitted to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. Throughout each and every province where the king's edict and law were announced, there was considerable mourning among the Jews, along with fasting, weeping, and sorrow. Sackcloth and ashes were the characteristics of many. When Esther's female attendants and her eunuchs came and informed her about Mordecai's behavior, the queen was overcome with anguish. Although she sent garments for Mordecai to put on so that he would remove his sackcloth, he would not accept them. I'm jumping on down here. Verse 4:15. Then Esther sent a reply to Mordecai, go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast in my behalf. Don't eat or don't drink for 3 days, night or day. My female attendants and I will also fast in the same way. Afterward I will go into the king, even though it violates the law. If I perish, I perish. Basically, if you went before the king without an appointment, he hadn't called you or summoned you, it was a death sentence. And she needed to talk to the king. If you came in and he reached the scepter out to you and touched you with it, you were allowed to come forward. So what she did, she hedged her bet. She got everybody together and they prayed and they fasted for 3 days because she knows this thing's about to happen and all the Jews are going to be killed. So she risked everything, and that's why she says, if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai set out to do everything that Esther had instructed him. And it just so happened on the third day, Esther put on her royal attire and stood in the inner court of the palace, opposite the king's quarters. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the palace, opposite the entrance. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she met with his approval. The king extended to Esther the golden scepter with his hand, and Esther approached and touched the end of the scepter. The king said to her, what is on your mind, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even as much as half of the kingdom will be given to you. Okay, do you still think it's a coincidence that an orphan girl out of 25 million people is standing here in front of the king to make this happen. And I want you to think about your own life this next year. When you get in situations and the car doesn't hit you, or this thing doesn't happen, or that thing doesn't happen, and think about the providence in this. Think about how crazy this is. Largest empire that ever existed on planet Earth. There's an orphan Jewish girl now being told by the wealthiest man on planet Earth, even as much as half the kingdom I'll give to you. This is why I think we need to understand what God's hand is in our daily lives. Esther replied, if the king is so inclined, let the king and the Haman come today on the banquet that I have prepared for him. The king replied, find Haman quickly so that we can do as Esther requests. So the king and Haman went, and remember Haman's the bad guy, went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. While the banquet of wine, and king said to Esther, what is your request? It shall be given to you. What is your petition? Ask for as much as half the kingdom, and it shall be done. My request and my petition is this. If I found favor in the king's sight, and the king is inclined to grant my request and perform my petition, let the king have Haman come tomorrow to the banquet, and I will prepare for them. At the time, I will do as the king wishes. Okay, so we're already having a banquet. But for whatever reason, she knows the timing's not right. There's another coincidence. So we're going to do this again tomorrow. And Haman is a very egotistical, full of himself guy. He is the only one being invited to this thing, so he is all in. He's so excited. He's also the one that wants to kill every Jew on planet Earth. So now Haman went forth that day, pleased and very much encouraged. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, he did not rise nor tremble in his presence. Haman was filled with rage toward Mordecai. Remember, that's the cousin. But Haman restrained himself and went on into his home. He then sent for his friends to join him along with his wife Zeresh. Haman then recounted to them his fabulous wealth. He loved himself, his many sons, and how the king had magnified and exalted him over the kings, the other officials, and servants. Haman said, furthermore, Queen Esther invited only me to accompany the king to the banquet that she prepared. Do you see where this is headed, guys? Do you see the pride? Do you see the fact that he invited only me? I am somebody. I am the somebody. I'm one step short of being a king. Do we get like that sometimes? Do we live like that sometimes? And also tomorrow I am invited along with the king. Yet all this fails to satisfy me as so long as I have to see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting in the king's gate. Haman's wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 75 feet high built, and in the morning tell the king that Mordecai should be hanged on it, then go to the king as the banquet contended. It seemed a good idea to Haman, so he built the gallows. So this man built a 75-foot tall gallows to hang Mordecai on. That's another one of them coincidences. Y'all keeping score? Throughout the night, the king was unable to sleep, so he asked, this is so funny, so he asked for the book containing the historical records to be brought. The dude can't sleep, so he says, bring me the records. I'm going to read that. That'll put me to sleep. That's some boring stuff. So as he reads the records, he realized that they had never thanked Mordecai for saving his life. It was in the Chronicles. He never thanked this old Jew that lived out by the gate. Never thanked him for saving his life, for how he stopped the plot to kill him. The king asked, what great honor was bestowed on Mordecai because of this? And the king's attendants who served him said, not a thing was done for him. Then the king said, who is that in the courtyard? Now Haman shows up. Coincidence, right? He's just been talking about Mordecai. He's just realized that Mordecai's not been blessed. Haman absolutely wants to kill Mordecai and everybody related to him. And here's Haman showing back up. He's about to share with him he needs to kill Mordecai. Okay? You got that part of the story? So now Haman had come to the outer courtyard of the place to suggest that the king hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had constructed for him. He never gets to say that. He was thinking it. I built that 75-foot gallows. The king loves me. Everybody loves me. Esther loves me. We're going to get this guy hanged. The king said to him, it is Haman who is standing in the courtyard. The king said, let him enter. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done for the man whom the king wishes to honor? So Haman thinks he's talking about him. Haman thought to himself, who is it that the king would want to honor more than me? So Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king wishes to honor, let him bring royal attire which the king himself has worn, and a horse on which the king himself has ridden, one bearing the royal insignia. Then let this clothing and this horse be given to one of the king's noble officials. Let him then clothe the man whom the king wishes to honor, and let him lead him about through the plaza of the city on the horse, calling before him. So shall it be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. Guess who gets to do this? Haman gets to go walk through, carrying Mordecai, talking about how great a job he did. I'm just sitting there, he wants to kill this guy. He's livid with this guy. Then the king said to Haman, go quickly, take the clothing and the horse, just as you described, and do as you just indicated to Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect a single thing that you have said. Like this wonderful plan you have for yourself, you're about to do it for Mordecai. So Haman took the clothing and the horse, and he clothed Mordecai. He led him about on the horse. This has got to be the worst part. Throughout the plaza city, calling before him, so shall it be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. I mean, that's the ultimate insult. You've got to walk around saying that through the whole town. Then Mordecai again set the king's gate, while Haman hurried away to his home, mournful and with a veil over his head. Haman then related to his wife Zeresh, to all his friends, everything that had happened to him. These wise men, along with his wife Zeresh, said to him, if indeed this Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is Jewish, you will not prevail against him. No, you will surely fall before him. While they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived. They quickly brought Haman to the banquet that Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman come to dine with Queen Esther. On the second day of the banquet of the wine, the king asked Esther, what is your request, Queen Esther? Here we go. It shall be granted to you, and what is your petition? Ask up to half the kingdom, and it will be done. Queen Esther replied, if I have met with the your king's approval, O king, and if the king is so inclined, grant me my life as my request, and my people as my petition. For we have been sold, both I and my people, to destruction and to slaughter and to annihilation. If we had simply been sold as male and female slaves, I would have remained silent, for such distress would not have been sufficient for troubling the king. The king responded to Queen Esther, who is this individual? Where is this person to be found who is presumptuous enough to act in this way? Timing is everything, people. It's not a coincidence. Esther replied, the oppressor and enemy is the evil Haman. Then Haman became terrified in the presence of the king and queen. Enraged, the king arose from the banquet of wine and withdrew to the palace garden. Meanwhile, Haman stood to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he realized that the king had now determined a catastrophic end for him. When the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet of wine, Haman was throwing himself down on the couch where Esther was lying, and the king exclaimed, will he also attempt to rape the queen while I am still in the building? So he's sitting there, he sees this picture of this man flopping on the couch, begging her for his life, and he thinks he's trying to harm her. As these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, said, indeed, there is a gallows that Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke out on the king's behalf. It stands near Haman's home and is about 75 feet high. The king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The king's rage then abated. Coincidence? All of that? Think about that for a minute. And in our little daily normal lives, we have all kinds of little miracles that happen. God winks, good word for it. We get hung up in traffic. And then we don't get involved in the wreck down the road. Things just happen. I truly believe that God is proactive in our lives. I do. But just like Esther had a choice, Esther was born for this. She didn't know it, but she was born to do this. She was born to save her people, an orphan, a nobody. God gave her one thing. She was beautiful. That kind of cuts a lot of slack with a lot of folks. But God gives you talents too. And God works you in situations and ways to get you where he wants you to go. That story is nothing short of miraculous. I mean, it is. There's not a single miracle. There's not a mention of God anywhere. But who gets saved by this? God's people, right? We're God's people. We get saved by his actions every day, especially if we do his will. she chose, and she didn't do it easily. She questioned it. She questioned, hey, should I do this or not? And it was so funny because it's like, Mordecai put it to her the right way. He said, maybe, just maybe, you were designed for this. You were born for this. You're called to do this. And if you don't, someone else will. That's the part we can't miss. Because when we do God's will, we get His blessing in our lives, in our families, in our jobs, and everything that we do. We get His blessing. Here's a story that doesn't have the word God mentioned in it one time. If you go on to read the rest of that, they went on to slaughter all of their enemies that were trying to do them in. I'm trying to remember this, but there was 1,000-year-old, what do you want to say, argument, I'll call it that, or kind of like a Hatfields and McCoy's thing going on with the Jews and the Aggaites, because I think it was Samuel who killed Haman's umpteen centuries back. If you remember Haggai the Agagite or something like that, I think Samuel hacked him to pieces. So there's a blood feud between these two peoples. So there was, so when Mordecai wouldn't bow to him, there was already a problem. But and that's another one of those coincidences. God showed he had the opportunity to show His power through weak, normal people. And He does it every day. He doesn't choose the strongest. He doesn't choose the most powerful. He chooses those that you would never imagine, like Mary and Joseph. We just went through Christmas. I want you to think about that. God chooses you too. If you don't think you got what it takes, I got news. You can't write yourself off because God's got you. I mean, you just can't. You know, we're going into a new year, and for me, I do believe it's going to be, I've said this last time, a year of decisions. There's a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of things we're going to have to deal with in our country, in our church, and you name it. There's just a lot going on. And I do believe it depends on how we respond. We must be more intentional every year. That's a good word, intention. What's important to you? Is church important to you? Is sharing Jesus with others important to you? Is taking care of your family important? What is important? Because whatever that is, that's what you're going to do. And your intention matters. You don't have to, here's the part. God doesn't require us to be successful, right? No. I mean, you will be. If it's in His will, you'll be successful more than you can ever imagine. But it's not about that. It's about the right motives, the right heart, and the right intention. And then He'll use you and do amazing things. If He can do it with an orphan Jew girl, He can do it with you. Amen? Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank You for an amazing story. A story full of pride and hate and all kind of things that just show our human nature and our character. But at the end of the day, we know and we understand that it's only You who rules this universe. It's only You that allows us to take one more breath. And it's only You who provides the way. And all the food and everything we have, You provide for us. And Lord, help us to be partakers of Your providence and partakers of Your will as we go into 2019. Help us to be ones who don't leave things to chance and instead believe and live for You and through You. In Jesus' name I do pray. Amen.